what I would like to do, Gabriella, we've got quite a couple of things to talk about today, and I know you probably want to talk at a high level first. We've seen your report, we've seen Galen's report, so let's talk, I would suggest, at a high level on all the focus areas that we want to talk about. So it's the two sustainability streams, the strategy and work plan, tax planning. Yeah, that's it. It's quite a lot. It includes experts as well when it comes to sustainability. So I would suggest we talk about all of that. We give Gabriella a chance to go through all of them. We give Galen a chance to also give us high level, we've read the report, so not a repeat of that, but just some high level comments from the CAG. And then I've got a little bit of a summary of our preparation session and some of the points that we came up with each one of them. Share that, and then we probably want to start off and focus on the sustainability experts elements because they are really important, and spend the bulk of the time on that, and then the rest on tax planning, which I know you also want to get out soon, as well as the strategy and work plan. So over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Linda. First of all, good afternoon to all of you. We met before, but anyway, it's a pleasure, as always, to be here. And I really mean it. I think these moments are important in terms of accountability, which is something that I like personally, but that above all helps improving the quality of everything that we do. So this is an important moment. It's a good moment, I hope. Linda, just making sure that your suggestion is that I go through the presentation as a whole, and then we'll, okay, that's fine, and then we will focus on the questions that you consider most relevant or a priority. So this presentation today aims at covering a significant number of topics, and this is because we are actually in a juncture at the IESBA where many things are happening and developing, progressing at the same time. We are heading to the December board meeting where we expect to have a considerable number of approvals, finalization of some projects, and exposure drafts of the others. And so this is really an important moment because this is the last sprint before we go to that moment. This presentation covers the strategy and work plan 2024-27, sustainability experts, and tax planning. And starting with the IESBA strategy and work plan, and I don't know if I am to move the slides or. Thank you. Thank you very much, Claudia. Okay. So on the strategy and work plan, very briefly, the state of play is that the consultation finished a couple of months ago, and we received 44 responses from different stakeholders. I would say that not yet as diversified as we would like, but we are getting there, and this is improving significantly in terms of the feedback and input that we are managing to get from different stakeholders. Anyway, there was some diversification. What I would like also the PIOB to know is that the work that we have done on these responses took into consideration not only the written responses, but a lot of feedback, oral feedback that we got from our stakeholders in the very different circumstances and opportunities that we had to connect with them. It's very clear that stakeholders are a little bit tired, and most of them, and mostly those who are not the usual ones, they do not always have the time to write, but they were happy to contribute, and so this is the proposal that was submitted for first read in September, and that will be submitted in December for approval, is the result of all this feedback that we got from our stakeholders. So the strategy and work plan is based on the one hand, on some strategic drivers that we have identified, and on those strategic drivers, themes, and actions, we identified also possible projects and initiatives at the IESBA level. At the same time that we discussed and came up with what we think should be the IESBA vision for the future, and which is described there. It's a long sentence, I recognize it. We could make it probably shorter, but we tried as much as possible to ensure that the IESBA vision includes everything that is important for us as we move into this next cycle of our strategy. But all in all, what makes us move, and the main concern and objective underlying the strategy and work plan for 24-27 is really acknowledging the growing, increasing importance of ethics in business and the need to reinforce trust, recognizing that there is still a lot to do and a long way to go until ethics is ingrained in business and in accountancy, etc., and do what we have to do and contribute as much as possible to that result. Everything that we do is underpinned by the idea that ethics is the cornerstone of this bigger project of elevating trust and behaviors in business and in accounting. So the responses to the consultation paper, I'm not going to describe them in detail. Here are some messages that we decided to highlight because they seem more significant. But all in all, there was a strong support for the proposals included in the consultation paper. Strong support to continuing doing work on sustainability and support, I would say, on the use of experts. Some respondents are of the view that the IESBA should continue working on sustainability reporting to explore the possibility of expanding the scope of these standards to other professionals than only professional accountants, for many reasons that I can explain afterwards. And some monitoring group members, namely IOSCO and IFIAR, urged us to keep identifying new emerging issues on the one hand, so to be attentive to what's happening around, but also to strengthen the code with respect to audit engagements and independence in particular. There were, in light of many things happening, and I'm not going to refer them in particular, but we all know what's happening around. There were some significant comments and proposals for us to look at the high-profile ethical lapses or unethical behaviors or events, etc., and that IESBA should consider the issue of firm culture and governance. And to this point, I'd like to tell you that if you go back to the consultation paper, you would see a number of projects, possible projects that we could be developing, like audit client and firm relationship, business relationships, these kind of things, which are examples of firm culture and governance things. But I think that we moved forward very quickly, very fast, and in a very bold way with respect to the need to do something with respect to culture, firms' culture and governance. And this reflection was has mainly developed and progressed over the summer after we looked at the responses and the very significant and strong comments with respect to the need for the IESBA to look at this issue and do something. What I can tell you is that the board discussed that topic in September, and there was full agreement that this should be one priority topic for the next strategy and work plan. This also shows how fast things develop. In early 2022, when we started drafting the survey for the strategy and work plan, etc., this was not exactly in our radar as an overarching issue, although of course we were sensitive to it. But very quickly things changed, and the perception, not only our perception about the need to do something, but also the stakeholders' requests and suggestions, bold suggestions for the IESBA not to stand still in this space. So this is, and I'm going to move immediately after into this topic, but let me just at this point reinforce the idea that this strategy and work plan, it is what it is. It will propose, suggest what our action and priorities will be over 2024, but of course we will have to remain very agile, flexible and nimble, because the reality around evolves very quickly, and we are not sure about in 3 years' time what is going to be the real priority in this changing context. Moving to the next slide, what is highlighted here are the two main topics that the board agreed we should address over the next strategy cycle 2024 and 2027. Elevating ourselves a little bit above the minutiae and the details of the projects that we could be developing. These are the two overarching, inspiring and topics providing coherence and consistency to everything that we will do over 24 to 27. This is what the board called the burning platforms that we could not avoid and we could not delay somehow. And this is firm culture and governance. There was some discussion around it's only firm or it's more than that. Just to start and start well, we decided to focus on firm culture and governance and to leave other possible scopes for a future moment, if ever. And the remaining topic of enlarging the scope of the code, which is already familiar to the PIOB as well, namely because of the question that, of course, we cannot ignore, of doing some profession agnostic or developing some profession agnostic standards for sustainability reporting as well. These are the two main strategic topics that the board has identified as, and that will somehow frame our action over the next cycle. Then, if you ask me how are you planning to address each one of them, I don't have an answer because this is going to be decided in December. The board and the staff, mostly, and the planning committee is working very hard to develop something more concrete for approval on the basis of these deliberations. It can be many things. It can be just an overarching work stream informing the projects themselves. It can be a project. But what I can tell you for the time being is that our vision is that considering the ongoing projects, the pre-commitments that we have, and the need to develop new work, this is going to require a very careful prioritization of the topics. So we also had other discussions around the topics that are mentioned here, and I'm not going to refer to individually, but I think they are all familiar to the PIOB. What we are inclined to do, but again, this is subject to the board approval, so I can't commit, but our vision now is that 2024 is going to be the year where we will complete the ongoing projects, sustainability experts. After the approval and certification, hopefully, of the tax planning project, we will have a lot of work in socializing the new standards, educating possible users of these standards, going everywhere to make sure that these standards are adopted, implemented, understood, etc. So this is gonna take most of our resources over 2024, and this is because we need to finalize this and finalize these projects well in the best way. But we will probably not delay the start of the reflection and discussion and some action with respect to firm culture and governance. And again, because this is a burning platform, everything that is happening now creates the appropriate framework and a context and sensitiveness to the need to develop something in this area. So we have to take profit of this opportunity. Like some say, never miss the good opportunities of a crisis, and that's what we need to do, to step in immediately and provide a message to our stakeholders that we want to go there and that we reject the pervasive existence of unethical conducts and unethical behaviors. So The strategy and work plan will be approved, hopefully, in December, and as early as possible, the PIOB will reflect and analyze the strategy and work plan. Here, I would have a request. Of course, I know that IESBA will have their strategy and work plan approved by the same time, but we want to start working as soon as possible, namely in this area of culture and governance. Of course, we have the support of the board and of our stakeholders, but we need to have a stronger certainty about that this is going to be our big project. With respect to the expansion of the scope of the code, and I know that this triggers a lot of questions and comments, two things that I think it's important to say. 1 year ago, I was explaining here and everywhere why we were developing sustainability ethics standards for sustainability reporting, and most of the stakeholders were like, that's not evident that we need them. Speaking about profession agnostic standards was a very difficult step, not here in this room, but with many other stakeholders. And now we are being required to do much more than we had decided to do, namely with respect to sustainability reporting. So again, things change very quickly. The decision that we made not to go in that direction by now has many reasons that I can explain if needed. But of course, we will not lose sight of this possibility, and probably, and again, it's just a possibility, not a decision, but as we look into the need to consider the possible expansion of the scope of the code, and there are many areas where this can happen, we will probably consider, well, first, a lot of outreach, coordination, collaboration with the corporate governance community, companies themselves, etc., but also a step approach, starting probably and possibly, if we come to the conclusion that this is necessary for the public interest, with sustainability reporting, and then seeing if there are other areas where we can use this example and move forward. So the next step is the approval by the board, certification by the PIOB, and review progress of the ongoing work streams. With respect to the pre-commitments, I'll just mention CIVs, and this is I know that this is an issue of very dear to the heart of the PIOB. So it will start still this year. We are trying to prioritize things in a way that we can start doing some work still in 2023. So it's going to take time, take a lot of resources and time in 2024 as well. And the post-implementation review, we are considering delaying the NOCLA post-implementation review and move forward with the other two that we had committed. It's the way that we can do. At the same time, I must remind that we are transitioning to a staff-based model, and this is already happening at the IESBA board and level. This is we are significantly, I'd say, advanced in that project. But 2024 will be the year of really making this more concrete and visible, which is also going to. It also requires some careful approach with respect to the prioritization of the projects. Then, I won't stop for questions and comments. IESBA sustainability project. I think that the PIOB is very familiar with what we have done until now and what we are planning to do. Basically, two work streams within the same project, work stream 1 and 2. The first one developing independence standards for sustainability assurance in a profession agnostic way. The second one developing ethics standards for sustainability reporting and assurance, both. These are the two. These two projects work, of course, together under the same task force umbrella. They are fully coordinated, and there are, of course, common issues that both work streams have to address together, like definitions and things like that. So. This is what we decided to do in December last year, and the progress made until September 2023. I must say that I think it's impressive. Of course, we could always think about doing more than we have done, but the urgency that was conveyed to the IESBA to develop something within the right time frame forced us to make options. It was not possible to do everything that we know that we should be doing in such a tight time frame. But you know that as of 2025, sustainability assurance is going to be mandatory, so the framework must be ready. We have IESBA standards, EFRAG standards, we will have IESBA standards, and the ethics standards, which were the last ones starting to be prepared, have to be ready by the same time, so there are no magic ones. We really had to make options and focus on what we consider to be the most important parts of this project. Of course, knowing that most probably we will have to do additional work, phase 2 of this project later on. So with respect to the presentation of the profession agnostic standards for sustainability assurance, PIOB is also aware that this was a matter for discussion at the board, strong discussion at the start, but we came up with a solution that is familiar to you as well, which is to concentrate everything in a new part of the code. It's not a radical solution of having one code for sustainability assurance. It's not the integrated solution of having the code amended throughout the code to integrate sustainability provisions, but something halfway which works well, we think, for non-professional accountants, but also for professional accountants without raising implementation and adoption concerns that some jurisdictions highlighted with respect to the possibility of having a standalone separated code. So this slide aims at explaining how this is going to work. I don't know if it explains or not, but it was at least our objective. But I'm going to try to make it simple. Part 5 is going to deal with the ethics and independence standards for sustainability assurance, and this part 5 will apply to all the engagements, the sustainability assurance engagements, which are in the scope of part 5. And in this scope, we included 2 types of engagements. Engagements which aim at providing an opinion on information which is prepared according to a general purpose report. So I think this is familiar to all of you. And alternatively, which is engagements on information which is mandatory according to laws and regulations, or that is prepared to support decision making by investors. So this was the way that we found to replace that first go, which was the heightened public interest that the PIOB, and I think that's right enough, highlighted or flagged to be a very unclear way of defining the scope. So we decided to define the scope in a more concrete way so that everybody knows what's in there. These are the engagements that will be subject to this new part 5. Then the rest, I'm not going into the details, and I'm ready to respond to questions. It's just to make sure that other kinds of engagements that everybody has clear, if it is another type of engagement, which parts of the code or not they have to use. But for what is worth here, it's important to make clear what is this part 5, and this part 5 is what deals with the new ethics and independent standards for sustainability assurance. Just one brief mention to the last top right box, which speaks about certification type or non-assurance engagements. This is to address or to make clear that we have not forgotten about those kinds of engagement, generally performed by non-professional accountants. But well, it's not mandatory, but it's generally like that. And to let PIOB know that we have been working very, very closely with these entities that in general perform and provide certification type engagements. I'm speaking about ISO, I'm speaking about accountability, I'm speaking about Bureau Veritatis, the International Accreditation Forum, etc. They are part of our work in a very, very close way. So the board decided also to include some ethics-related topics in part 5, not going again into the details, but the decision was to include most sections of part 1 and 3, fundamental principles, and the part devoted to PAPPs in part 5. So the part 5 also includes ethics standards for sustainability assurance. There is a new requirement for sustainability assurance providers to consider communicating no CLAR to the auditor and vice versa. This was subject to a significant discussion at the board and at the technical level, but we came to the conclusion that it was necessary to include that because there is no reason that these engagements do not follow the same rules, so to speak, or the same norms in terms of communication of no CLAR. Then the reason why we decided to include also provisions on group sustainability assurance engagements. We know that IESBA addresses this issue only in an overarching way in the ISA 5000, but for us it was mandatory, it was absolutely necessary to address this topic for 2 reasons. One, more formal, which is we committed to have a part 5 which is the equivalent of the existing part 4A at the same level of requirement, the same kind of requirements, etc., of course, adjusted to sustainability. And this is something that part 4A addresses. The second one is that looking at the reality of sustainability assurance, it's mostly about groups and not individual firms. So we will be missing an important part of the problem if we were not to include the necessary provisions in this respect. And then the relationship with value chain entities. I think it's not a place to discuss technicalities, but of course this was also necessary and subject to a significant discussion within the board, the task force, and the staff. The plan is to develop guidance regarding the threats that are created by the relationships between the firm and team members with a value chain entity. And this proposal recognizes that there is a distance from value chain entities, some of them sometimes very small ones, high risk of independence issues therein. So it's difficult to address this, but it was necessary to address this. We decided to include the application of the knows or has reasons to believe principle by the firm, but without no monitoring obligation or additional administrative burden. This may pose questions, of course, how there is no obligation, but they will have to consider this, but it's the only way to address this topic at this point in time and with the frameworks that are available now. So not missing that part, but not putting too much burden, and unnecessary, because they would never be able to do it in an extensive way. Moving now to the use of experts. This slide aims at providing the PIOB with an idea of where we are, the as is, and where we are moving to. This is a matter of public interest. I think that the PIOB is very well aware of the evolution of our own thinking in that respect. The PIOB was one of our stakeholders asking for some time for the years, but to do some work in this area because the PIOB considered that it was not enough. What is there, the existing framework? No. So, yeah. And additionally, while discussing sustainability reporting and assurance, it became, of course, very clear, because it's a fact, that if the use of experts is already intensive in many areas, in sustainability is going to be even more intensive. It's a wide, new area, very technical in some respects. You have environmental, you have social, you have governance, and the others topics coming in. So the intervention, the use of experts is going to be intensified. And we very quickly came to the conclusion that if we were to cover the whole supply chain of sustainability information, this area has to be also covered by robust, high-quality standards. because they will have a significant influence and participation in the production and reporting and assurance of sustainability information, and because if there was no framework for these experts, it was very easy to avoid the framework that would be in place for reporting and assurance and use the experts area or the experts area to provide some services in ways that could not be subject to any kind of oversight or controls or whatever. So, as you know, the purpose is mainly to ensure an additional rigor of independence for external experts whose work is used in audit and assurance, etc. Not only for sustainability, of course, but it's a cross-cutting standard relevant for sustainability, but for technology, tax planning, and accounting, etc. So initially, we considered, the first proposal that we considered was to work on independence directly, independence of experts, but it was clear, very quickly became clear, that if we were to issue or to propose direct independence requirements on external experts, this would be not operable, we could not make it effective from an operational perspective, and would be unenforceable for the simple reason that the code of ethics does not apply to external experts. So it was no use saying that the experts had to be independent in this or that way, because that would not apply to them. So we had to be creative and find a different way of getting to the same result in an operable and enforceable way, and that's why the IESBA is proposing that this topic is addressed not directly on with independence requirements, but using the objectivity principle and requirements, putting the obligation or the burden, if you, as you want to name it, on the auditor or the sustainability assurance provider, who has to, according to the criteria set up there, has to decide if he or she can use the work of the expert, and in case he or she decides to use the work of the expert, if those criteria are met, and if there are any threats, etc. So it's like going to the same result in another, taking another route or another path, which ensures that there will be enforceability, it's operationally effective, etc. So this is the proposed ethical framework. I'm not going into the details again, but one important thing was the discussion on the definitions, the evaluating whether to use work of an expert, as I mentioned, and the potential threats that arise when using the work of an expert. This proposed ethical framework was discussed with our stakeholders, and we had some of them providing us with very important input and suggestions, namely those listed on the right side of this slide. And of course, with all the uncertainties that these new areas pose, it is our conviction that we are well placed to develop and offer a robust and very balanced approach to address public interest expectations. Not to forget that experts in these many areas, but mainly on sustainability, are not that many. And if we were to require too much in that respect, and that's what our stakeholders were very clearly telling us, we would risk not leaving experts available to provide the services that they have to provide. So this balance that is referred there is really a concern that we try to address all the time while developing this framework. It has to be effective, it has to be operational, it has to ensure independence, but it also has to ensure that there will be experts available in the marketplace to provide the services that the sustainability assurance providers will need to use. This is the timeline of this project, Sustainability and Experts. We will hopefully approve the exposure draft in December. This was the timeline that we decided since the start and did not depart from it. We will, well, in January, the exposure draft will be released after the approval by the board and all the work that is necessary to be done there. Comment period, approval of the standards by the end of 2024, and then the, of course, PIOB certification and the rollout and implementation support, which is going to be very, very, very demanding. Also because it's possible that we will have to do a lot of work in terms of capacity building, educating, etc. And there are some ideas in that respect that I'm not going to share them by now because they are in a too immature, non-mature stage, but that soon we can be sharing. So last topic, tax planning and related services. Very quickly, the tax planning project is coming to an end. We had a very good discussion in September, which allows me to believe that there will be no major obstacles in the final approval in December. The board was, not only the board was comfortable from what we could listen around the table, but also from our perspective, the concerns and the issues raised by our respondents were all of them addressed in the final proposal with strong arguments and grounds for the final proposals made. So unless something very unexpected happens between the September board meeting and December board meeting, it is more or less clear that the board is ready for an approval in December. And this is going to be a very important moment for the board. This is the first time that an international organization and a standard setter dares to step in this area. The PIOB is aware, I think, that it wasn't easy from the start. I was not there when this project started, so I'm not the owner or the. It was already there when I joined the IESBA, but I'm aware that it wasn't easy at all. It wasn't easy at all because those who should be supporting the project were very far. It's all these entities which traditionally were not connected with the IESBA, so they were not even aware of this, and those, the usual stakeholders, they were not that much comfortable with the idea of an ethics standard project on tax plan. It's something that still makes some people, shocked. So it was really a journey. These 2 years, they were a journey, an incredible journey. And there are reasons, and I'm not going to go further than this, but we have reasons to believe that this project, with all its fragilities and strengths, it is what it is. We have reasons to believe that it's balanced, but it's also groundbreaking. And it's groundbreaking because, again, it's the first time that there will be a global, international ethics benchmark for tax planning. It's the first time that tax planning services providers will know that they have to think twice before they make decisions with respect to providing or not providing the service, advising or not advising on the tax planning engagement. It's really creating a new benchmark, ethical benchmark for these providers. And I think that we have reasons to believe that there are some chances that this may become the international standard for many jurisdictional or whatever initiatives that may take place, but at least that will allow for a common language and a common framework in terms of what we call the gray zone. This is not about tax morals. This is not about tax evasion. This is about helping, and more than that, leading the professional accountants when providing tax planning services to abide by a clear ethical benchmark and standard and make their decisions and options in accordance to those ethical standards. It's principles-based, so enough flexible. This is one of the areas where the different jurisdictions have present more diversity in terms of regulation, so it's very difficult to capture the common, what can be common to all of them, and what can be implementable. Because, I mean, let's be clear. Could we have gone farther than this and more, have a stronger or more requiring framework? Yes. Would it be adoptable and implementable by most of the jurisdictions? No. So this project, we look at it not at the end, once approved, if approved, not the end of the story, but the start of the story. It's going to be a lot to do and a lot of possibilities once this is ready. And well, this is the tax planning project timeline. No surprises, second read in December, and hopefully approval. And with this, I think that my presentation is come to an end, and I'm ready for your questions.
My goodness, that was a mouthful. Thank you so much for that, Gabriela, and it's always much easier when, as you speak to your slides, you know, it always strikes me how things just start to fall in place for me. We obviously had a prep session before this, and we spent a lot of time. I tried to consolidate the comments from the board, and we also said, let's take a step back and look at it from a high level and give you sort of the high level, let's call it more strategic and comments other than necessarily going to a lot of detail. What I suggest we do is I give you the comments on sustainability and experts, because I think that is really, really important for us to talk about. I will then refer to the board to just make sure that I haven't left anything out, and I'll ask the board members, in the interest of time, let's not go into a huge amount of repetition and detail, because we really would like to make sure that these top comments of ours are discussed a little bit and responded to from your side. And then I would like to leave about 30 minutes or so at the end that we can then do the strategy and work plan, as well as the tax planning side of things. I hope that makes sense. I think before I go into the comments, maybe just an overarching comment, and that is that we can't help to be slightly worried that your December meeting is really, really full, and we would just encourage you to just think carefully about that agenda. I know you will do what you have to do, and there are things that will have to be there, but we understand the importance of getting the exposure draft on sustainability and experts out, and that's if all else fails, that's the one thing that for very many knock-on effect reasons shouldn't slip, and I know you're fully aware of that. So I think maybe just that as an overarching comment. When it comes to sustainability and experts, and I'll sort of talk about the two of them jointly, because they are in a way, you know, very much related, and the principal comments that we have are similar. Realistically, there are still lots of little and bigger moving parts that must now just be bedded down and finalized, and we think it's really important that the standard is sufficiently clear, also both of these elements sufficiently clear, also bearing in mind that others that are not so familiar with the typical professional accountant, auditor, accountant code language will look at it. So the whole concept of making sure that you just maybe somewhere go back to the objectives or criteria that you picked up in the PIF for this project, to make sure that it's actually just dealt with appropriately, so that the standard is clear for all of those people. And that goes a little bit to definitions and all sorts of things, but I'll mention them just now. The other point that I will also just make at a high level is ultimately the exposure draft is a very important basis for what ultimately the standard will be. And yesterday, and we've seen it a couple of times, and you've heard it as well, we heard again from IESBA, or from the MG chair, when we asked him around IOSCO endorsement or not of these standards, bearing in mind that the reporting standard has been endorsed, what is in their mind the criteria, and that is really to have a high quality standard. And I know that's what everybody strives towards, but I think that's really important, especially in this round for the sustainability standard. So maybe just a few high level comments. What we battled with a lot of things just on clarity, and you gave that summary. I kept my iPad open at that summary that you spoke about the different assurance providers and what they refer to, but we thought it would be really useful, maybe just between the two work streams at the leadership collective level, for your board or your leadership to just stand back and say, let's just draw a high-level picture of, firstly, who all these individuals are that we're talking about, because there are professional accountants as assurance providers, then there are other assurance providers, and there are terminology around other practitioners or another practitioner, and all of those things. And then there are also, when you talk about everybody in what you refer to as this value chain, all those other various roles and groups, including the experts. And just these are all the players or individuals or people that we're talking about. Make sure that the definition is sufficiently clear, because we battled a bit with, for example, other practitioners, another practitioner. Just make sure that the definitions are really clear in a way that everybody can understand, and then for each one of them, what are the requirements applicable to them? Because it is all there, but we battle, our navigation sort of got stuck to really find out, okay, this is, you refer to the sections of the part 4B versus the part 5, but for each one of them, never mind where it is in the code, firstly, what is it? What is it? An independence requirement? Is an objectivity requirement? What does that mean? So it's just a little bit of what's the high level map when it comes to that. And then obviously making sure, very importantly, that it is really profession agnostic, because you don't want inadvertently to have independence requirements that are applicable to a professional accountants that is slightly differently worded to those that are applicable to other assurance providers. So that just that overarching objective that was set of profession agnostic, just to double check that there's not little nuances in wording that can result in arbitrage or not that level playing field. So we thought that picture is probably clearly in your head and in the head of the task forces, but even us that are probably closer than some of those other people that will read the exposure draft, we sort of battle to see that picture. And it would be most useful if there is a picture like that with very clear definitions, very clear descriptions of requirements, and then the cross-referencing to where to find that in the code. I've made the comment about professional agnostic standards. Then when it comes to, you spoke about other practitioners that might be in that value chain, and making sure, as well as when it comes to the experts, making sure that they meet, that the practitioner, the professional accountant, or that the assurance provider has got a duty to make sure that they are either independent or the expert side objective. There's probably a little bit more explanation of how to, and you actually gave that slide, which I thought was quite useful, just that clarity on how is it, what's the criteria, how do you measure. We thought that is really important. So, and I actually thought that slide of yours was quite useful on it. Let me just see, we had a question about the expert requirement being objectivity and not independence, but you spoke to that, and I'll leave it to the board members if they want to make further comments on that. And then let me just see if I left any comments out. I spoke about measuring against the perf again. And the one other general comment is just be aware of scope creep, because, I think the thing that can easily happen with something that's so new and groundbreaking is there just more and more questions that come up. And I think it is important, you've already made the decision to park and push some of that out as part of the new strategy and work plan, but that they're not little things that pop up. We saw the no claw issue coming up and all of that there's not, some of those things you literally have to say, we park that, and maybe that's something that we deal with later, because those little things might eventually lead to tripping over or not making the deadline. So those are sort of the high level comments. I'm going to ask Galen just for their comments. There was a specific comment in your report, Galen, on sustainability that I want you to specifically comment on. And then I'm going to check with my board members on sustainability and experts if there were important comments that I left out. And then I'll go back to you. And Galen, the comment that I read, and I actually forgot to mention it when we had our prep session, you had a comment, and maybe that's also, maybe they're suffering from the same problem that we're suffering. There was a comment in your report that said that you found that in discussing the expert side, that the board was not necessarily as engaged because the task force was quite active, but maybe there's also a little bit of a lack of understanding and education when it comes to the board, when it comes to all of these issues. And it sort of made me think, well, maybe we're not the only ones that are battling a little bit with that. So comment in general, and if there's something you want to say about that as well.
Well, maybe I didn't state it very clearly, but I wasn't saying that the board wasn't engaged. I think the board was very engaged, but there was just a couple of board members that seemed to not have the background and understanding. So there was a lot of interplay among the presenter and those board members. And, I talked to Tom about that, I think, during the meeting. And or after the meeting, and also Gabrielle, and suggested, maybe there's some sort of educational session prior to the board meeting for people that really are a little short on experience with this area, because it's complicated. But the board was engaged, so I apologize for maybe mischaracterizing that.
That's useful, and maybe I misread it, and I think that does maybe also point to as you say, the complexity of the issue, and it's very hard to make a complex issue very clear and simple in words. And I think therein lies the challenge for your board and your task forces. All right, I'm going to check for cards. Tom, as you know, was our observer, so Tom, please just fill the gaps for me. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much for your presentation. That's very extensive, and I think I felt that the board made a giant step forward for the December meeting. But as Linda expressed, that we need a very big picture to go when you go out with the exposure draft. So it has to be very clear, and then it has to be understandable and accessible to the non-PA world wealth. And one example I'd like to reiterate is that the scope of the part 5. Currently, as I commented in the board meeting, workstream 1 and workstream 2 may have a little bit of different scope, and that's sort of the starting point has to be made very, very clear. So that is one of the suggestions we'd like to share with you. And the second part, I think it is that's coming back to a little bit of the prioritization, because the December is the time for deciding the exposure draft, but you have a huge amount of work to do still. So if you feel that some areas are a little bit immature or half-baked, you can have a decision to prioritize some of the parts of because it's a sort of the difficult decision, because you have to be, as you mentioned, you have to pay attention to the equivalence of the existing code. But at the same time, there is sort of the discussion. Perhaps you need some sort of discussion for the prioritization, for the timeliness, and the understandability of the code. That's their message. I'd like a little bit clarified. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I just want to double check, Galen, if there was anything further that you wanted to add from the CAG on sustainability. And experts, of course.
Everything that Gabriella has presented here, I would say that the CAG is behind. In our September meeting, there are issues that arose, and I think very constructive input that the CAG had. They were very energized, enthusiastic. I think we had two of the best CAG meetings that I've ever attended in the last year, and I don't know if that's because everybody knows that they're being phased out, the CAG is being phased out this year or not, but they were engaged. I think there's some work that still needs to be done, but you know, there's a game plan for getting it accomplished, and I think we're on the right track.
That's very useful. Thank you, Galen. Philippe?
Thank you, Chair. Gabriela, thank you very much for the presentation, and Gail too. That's very focused and very clear to understand and to grasp. And just a comment, you know, in the field, for example, in France, I'm always, you know, admirative, I would say, of the pride of the professionals relating to the code of ethics. And so I want to take this opportunity to thank your organization and IESBA, because each time, and I remember when I was a member of the board of the regulator in France, you know, with the contacts with the auditors, the statutory auditors, and notably in the context of sustainability, that was, wow, but we have such a code of ethics, which is unique, you know, in the world and so on, but working with other professions, you know, it's a waste that can deteriorate, you know, the quality of assurance we provide and so on. So I think this contribution in terms of professional pride and quality is really one of the main attractive points of the profession, and a key component of the pride to be a professional accountant. This being said, Gabriela, as we are I remember some discussions in Paris in working groups, on the professional agnostic side, there is one thing which is really key. It's the language and the definition, you know? So the clarity of the words, because you can imagine sometimes that you understand, you know? It's like a fuzzy echo in your brain, but you don't understand with the same level of understanding that the professionals who have been working for decades. So the point is the definitions. And the key aspects for me, you know, if I put myself in a position of a non-professional accountant, is the glossary. I had a view on the current glossary in the Code of Ethics, which is totally inappropriate to support a profession-agnostic approach. You know, all the definitions, notably external expert, for example, had a look on that, and you know, are not appropriate to be efficient and to give an understanding from someone who is not in the profession and who has understood things, who doesn't need the glossary, I would say. So at the moment, there is this glossary, and most of the elements, assurance, engagement, expert, blah, 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 should be reviewed in the light of this opening to a non-professional accountant. So my first question is, have you envisaged, contemplated some substantial work to make definitions? Because, for example, and sorry, I'm going to accelerate, but the definition of an external expert in the glossary at the moment is what a professional accountant use, the source of an information that a professional accountant uses in his assurance work. So that means, you know, it's not a definition. That means the professional accountant uses something and he decides that someone is an expert because he uses the information. There is no substantial definition of an expert, you know? So there are many things in this context to be reviewed, which are keys in my view, because it's the introduction, you know, to have a sort of dictionary, glossary, when you are not a member of this profession, to understand what you are reading and the specific, you know, value of keywords. That's my first question. And the second one is that you are going in sustainability to work with people who are in the ISO environment. In 23, ISO delivered a code of ethics and conduct, which is very simple, 2 pages based on 10 principles. I'm sure that you know this. So did you perform a sort of analysis to check that the words, you know, were similar or had the same definition or were used for the same objective in the ISO code referring to ethics and principle and in the code of ethics of the profession? Because that's the starting point of ambiguity, you know, using the same words with different context, with a different definition. So I don't know if you have performed this job, but I would be interested to know, and if you have noted some key differences to clarify. Thank you, Gabrielle.
Thank you, Philippe. Begonia?
Well, thank you very much, Gabriela, for the very clear explanation about the current, the future, the next 2 months of IESBA, that you have to do many things, and it's a very short period, frankly. I'm been observing IESBA. You've been doing many things, but the time that you have now, since from now till first week of December, is short to cover all the things you have to do. But I have a question about one of the slides that you have shown here, which is when Part 5 is applied versus Part 4B. This is something that was already discussed in June when I was observing the meeting. At the time, there was a definition of heightened public interest engagements, and nobody was really convinced or understanding what this meant. And I wonder now if you have already decided when Part 5 is going to be applied, because I don't understand, if we are talking about sustainability assurance engagements, why are there 2 different parts, Part 5 versus Part 4B? Where do you fix the line, the divided line that makes useful one versus the other when we are talking about independence? So that's a very short question. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, I think the headings in that table is a little bit confusing. Sandy?
Yeah, I guess my question was sort of a reiteration of, or not question, I guess it's more of a comment, of Linda's point and just what Begonia said. You know, the chart that shows who's the assurance provider and the type of engagements and the like, I think we just need that a little more expanded out, right? So who's the PA, non-PA, what's the independence, what's the engagement, and then how do experts sort of cut across all of that, right? So that you can see it, because it's like this big matrix. It's really hard to do in your head. You know, at least I found it. In your going through this again, you know, after several discussions of it, it's a little bit clearer, but you know, the irony of it is that really the only professionally agnostic part of this is on Part 5 engagements, right? And so, because the PA follows Part 5 and the non-PA follows Part 5. Otherwise, they go down different paths, right? So if they go down different paths, it's not professionally agnostic, right? it's saying a non-PA versus a PA has different responsibilities other than on Part 5 engagements. So I think it's important, and I understand that there may be reasons for that. I think it's just to be really accessible to people. A picture be worth 1,000 words, because in words, we're asking people to put this all together, and we maybe need to put it all together for them. So I'm just reiterating sort of what Linda said and a point that Begonia made.
Okay, thank you. That's all the comments we have. So we're going to give you a chance to respond, and then hopefully after that we can go to the other two. Thank you.
Happy to try. And if I'm not well succeeded, please let me know. And I'm going to put my glasses to try to see the questions. Well, on your first comment, overarching comment, Linda, which was somehow reiterated by Tom on the December meeting challenge. Is it possible? Should we rethink the agenda, reschedule, prioritize? Well, I think it's possible. I'm very much convinced that it's possible, but the September board meeting was crucial. We were already aware of the challenges in December. This is not new for us. This is what we were planning since last year for December 2023. So no news here, but the September board meeting was absolutely crucial for us to make a decision if it was going to be possible or not. And I think that I'm in a very good position, and Galen and Tom were there as well, to tell you that even if it was a very difficult board meeting, it was really the platform, the preparatory meeting for that to be possible. September was probably more difficult than December is going to be. December is going to be difficult in terms of managing time, I think, more than other things, but this meeting was crucial. This was a very difficult meeting in terms of management, of not of time, but also, well, some comments that Galen made, which are more than appropriate in terms of people are in different levels of understanding of things, try to use the board meeting to educate themselves on some issues, get into dialogue and etc. So it was really difficult, but I think that after, this was the sense of most of the board meetings, and I tend to be optimistic, but I was like, was it okay? And the board members were like, we are prepared, namely the chairs of task forces. So I'm sorry that the PIOB observer that I don't know who is going to be is going to have a hard time there with long days for sure during 5 days, but I think it's possible. With respect to possible prioritization, of course, if we feel that we are not ready, that we are not mature enough, we don't want to put something out which is not of high quality. And that, of course, will make us step back. I don't think, though, that we should reprioritize anything just because of the time or of the burden that we put on stakeholders or whatever. Because, I mean, strategy and work plan, we cannot delay it. Tax planning is there, so it doesn't make sense. The only reprioritization that we could consider would be sustainability and the use of experts. But this is a package. The fact that they are separated into two different task forces does not mean that there should not be, and they must be considered together. And that became very clear during the board discussions, that there were issues raised at the experts area that needed some responses from sustainability and vice versa. So unless, and of course this is a commitment, and this is, I think that's reasonable enough not to put something forward just because we made a commitment on timing, but unless we are in such a situation, I think it's better to, even for stakeholders who will have to analyze things in conjunction, it's better to have the package and not to get back to what they already have comment on once we put the others standard forward. So this is where we are now. Doesn't mean that anything cannot happen in between or at the December board meeting, but we are very well aware of the difficulties of the December board meeting and ready to go. So we will have to overcome those difficulties. Then on clarity, definitions, words, classification of the players in this, in all this. Well, what can I say? I fully agree. I couldn't agree more with that. That's something that it's constantly in our discussions, in my discussions with staff, with board, and etc. We need to be clear. We need to be simple. I think that sometimes it's more simple, clear, both things. Is it easy? No, it is not easy. It is not easy for many reasons. First reason is because we are dealing with completely new issues, where we are dealing with different players than the usual ones, and in addition, we are the architects of this framework. And you know that the tension between the architects and the engineers is always there, because architects think that it is nice to have a lamp under the table, and the engineers will say, well, this, from a technical point of view, this is a no-go. And the user said, but I need light. So these kind of things, we are the architects, and it's sometimes difficult for us to understand and to realize, to put ourselves in the shoes of the users and understand, this is not clear, this is clear, etc. So these kind of reactions are more than welcome. We really value them because it's important to test what we are giving to the users and stakeholders and etc. This said, this is a very difficult exercise, because we have many constraints. One constraint is that what we are trying to do is equivalent to something which already exists. This is not per se an excuse. You will respond, but you could do it in a different way. But then, Linda, you were there to the point when you said, well, but you have to be careful, because just the fact that you change a little word can drive arbitrage. So this tension between making it more tailor-made, say things in a different way, etc., it's okay, and we should do it as much as possible, but the limit is not creating a risk of arbitrage, not creating what some people around the table call the two versions of the truth, which makes that almost impossible to enforce. So we had in many discussions around that, probably some of us, at least, not saying all of us, would like to make it use another language, another kind of approach, and etc. But then this equivalence between Part 4A and Part 5 and the need to make sure that this is equally enforceable, understandable, etc., makes it extremely difficult. So this balance between making it simple, but at the same time sticking to a reality, which is assurance, and everything that it implies, makes it extremely difficult. Nevertheless, it's a very good observation that I really thank you, because, and we really value the reactions from our stakeholders and the PIOB, of course, with respect to the clarity of this, of the definitions of the concepts, etc. And with this, I'm going to go directly to Philippe's comments on the glossary. And the response is, we are doing a full revision. And if I'm not saying anything, if I'm saying anything that it's not right, Ken will correct me. But the glossary is being subject to a full revision to make sure that all the concepts in there, all the definitions in there, are also appropriate for sustainability reporting and assurance, and to make sure that we include new definitions that are necessary for this purpose. Then there was a discussion around, should we have two glossaries, but the decision around the board was like, no, it makes no sense, because it would be extremely difficult and risky to select part of the concepts to make part of glossary 2. So this work is being done. I'm not going to say that it's fully successful, because it's not for me to say that, but it's being subject to a very specific attention. And if you go to the documents of the board in September, there was, a specific part of the exercise was looking at the glossary and see if it's okay or not. This will be subject to adjustments over time. This is clear for us. We will not get it right on day one. It will be subject to improvements, etc. As it starts being implemented, we will find out that some concepts or definitions need further adjustments, but it's not out, it's on our radar.
Gabriella, I see Ken wants to say something about the glossary.
Oh, sorry, Ken.
Yes, thank you very much, Linda and Gabriela. I just wanted to go back to Philip's question as well. in terms of how we're working with the ISO ecosystem. We have been in liaison with ISO. It is one of our key stakeholders, as it were. They are the standard setter for the ISO practitioners. First of all, I think it's important to recognize that ISO practitioners have been using the IESBA standards as well as our code. Some ISO practitioners, in fact, have been using our code. Just to give an example, DNV is a very large ISO practitioner. They have used ISA 3000 to undertake assurance engagements on sustainability in the past and continue to do that. And therefore they have been in compliance with our code as well, because ISA 3000 is benchmarked against the code. It is anchored to the code. That's number one. Number two, we are also engaging with the International Accreditation Forum. That is the oversight body for all the ISO practitioners. It's the EFR of the ISO world. We are meeting with them on October 16th in London, precisely to discuss the mapping exercise they are undertaking. They are mapping all the ethical and so-called independence requirements that they have within the ISO-related suite of standards that apply to assurance engagements they perform on their side. Those requirements sit at different levels. Some of those are in the so-called code of conduct that Philippe has mentioned. It's maybe 2 pages, as you mentioned, Philippe, nowhere near comparable to what we have in the code. There are certain additional requirements that are at the IAF level, and these are in what IAF refers to as mandatory documents. So there are additional requirements which we will find out as a result of that mapping exercise they are undertaking. And there is a third layer, and that third layer is essentially requirements that are established at the national level or at the industry level, because ISO engagements cover many different industries, and certain industries do have very specific requirements insofar as ethics is concerned. So all to say is, we are very conscious of making sure that the standards we are developing are going to be profession agnostic. We believe our code is as clear as it can be on the basis that we must have that premise, that the standards that we're developing are the same equivalent standards that apply to audits of financial statements. We cannot have standards that are at different level. And the moment we start changing the wording, we're going to cause issues on the audit side. Because what we've said is those standards we're developing standards, those engagements we're developing standards for are standards that have the same level of public interest as audits of financial statements. So anytime we start making changes to fundamental terms and concepts that sit in the glossary, we'll create a lot of issues on audits. And that's why we have to be very careful. But as Gabriel says, we're going through our work with a fine-tooth comb, especially on terms and definitions, to make sure that these are as clear as possible. These can be applied in a very professional agnostic manner. And certainly we will continue that discussion, as I say, with the ISO practitioners and the ISO stakeholders. And the meeting in London, as I say, in a little over a week's time will be very informative for us, and we'll be happy to report back to PIOB. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. That's very clear. Thanks. Back to you, Gabriella.
Thank you very much, Ken. So I'm looking to the questions. So there was a question from you, Linda, on the IOSCO and MG approach to our work, possible endorsements, how they are looking into our standards. Well, it's not for me to say what they are planning to do. What I can tell this board is what I know and my intuition. We have been working very closely with IOSCO. Yesterday, Tom and we had a meeting with Martin Maloney. Each time we come here, we meet him. It's a very easy and well-working relationship with them. IOSCO, as you know, had some troubles with ISSB endorsement. They were almost on the verge of not being able to endorse them political reasons, all these things. So this, of course, leads them to be, makes them cautious with respect to any commitment, also because they can't commit. It's a decision for the board of IOSCO. It's not a decision for the chair or the president or the secretary general. It's a decision for the board. The board has 30-something members, and they never know when one will oppose, and that becomes a problem. That said, IOSCO is increasingly, I think, interested and comfortable with what we are doing. This is reflected and will be very soon, on the 12th of October, the FSP report, which is, of course, monitored by IOSCO in respect to what they say. We'll have a very clear message about IOSCO's comfort and forward-looking vision with respect to IESBA and IESBA standards. And from what I can't say everything that I know, but there is already kind of a plan of a step approach in 2 phases or 3 phases from IOSCO with respect to these standards are going to be. So I think we are in the right way, but of course it will depend, as you say, on the quality of the standards. IOSCO will not endorse or suggest or recommend these standards just because it's the IESBA or the IESBA standards. It's because they add the quality of the infrastructure. With respect to who are those individuals, Linda, PAs, non-PAs, external providers, experts, etc. Well, we take the message. It's really important that we come up with a very consistent wording to define each one of the agents. I'd say it's natural that the language is not yet completely stabilized because it's a new thing, and then IFAC comes and calls them OSPs, and so it's important, at least for the IESBA, so we take the message back and we'll do that exercise as much as possible. With respect to what is applicable to each one of them, again, couldn't agree more. That slide, as I said, aims at explaining part of the story, but putting that the story in the perspective of each one of the providers is probably simpler and more useful. Saying, I'm a PA, I'm going to perform a sustainability assurance engagement on something, in which part of the code or which framework do I fall? And that exercise about PAs, non-PAs, and the kind of subject that they are addressing can be very useful and illustrate in a simpler way, in a more useful way, where they are. So again, this was something that we were already discussing, but we will have to do some additional work in that respect, and thank you for the comment. Then on experts, independence versus objectivity, well, I think that I explained, but if there is any doubt, again, it was mostly the idea that if we were to develop these standards in the perspective of independence of the external experts, that would not work because the code does not apply to them. So there was no way that could be enforceable, implementable, or whatever. It was just a wishful thinking that they could be independent. When we started trying to understand how could it work in practice, there was no way. So we are comfortable that this approach fulfills, meets the objective that we wanted, which is to ensure a higher level of independence and objectivity of the experts' work, but in ways that makes it implementable and enforceable, because it puts the obligation on the auditor, who is subject to the code and must verify all those criteria that are more or less imported from the independence part of the code. The comment that we should be aware and careful not to allow the reopening issues which are stabilized, namely no-CLA. No-CLA it's not an easy part of this story, and it would have been easy for the IESBA to avoid it, to be very frank and say, oh, it's too complicated, so and too this and that, let's avoid it. But to be honest, we couldn't avoid it. And so we decided to face the difficulty, acknowledging that this is going to be very difficult and very aware of that risk that we won't at all want to take. So no reopening of former decisions, namely in that respect. It was a very difficult project, a very groundbreaking one. Let's not restart discussing NOCLA just because of sustainability. And this is one of the topics at the board that caused some tension because there were some questions about things that were discussed long ago, stabilized, decided, and it's not time to reopen them. So agree with that. Well, on Tom's comments, the clear picture and etc. for the prioritization, but scope of Part 5, work stream 1 and work stream 2, your comment was, well, they seem to have a different scope and this is complex. I can agree, but I think that we can't do nothing against that reality. They have the two projects have a different scope. One is on reporting, the other is on assurance, so the scope is by nature different. And of course, on top of that, we decided to take a different approach with respect to sustainability assurance and make it profession agnostic, whatever it means, and not to do the same effort immediately on sustainability reporting for the reasons that I think the PIOB knows. But the main reason was that we had clear calls to develop profession agnostic standards for for non-professional accountants on sustainability assurance, and we heard here at this board requests for that to be a reality. We never had the same call before for sustainability reporting. Actually, we did not have a real call for ethics, although our stakeholders were very comfortable with the IESBA developing new ethics standards for sustainability reporting. And it's us who are asking, we are asking our stakeholders, do you think that this should be, the scope should be enlarged, that we should go profession agnostic? So it's a bit us pushing this subject, and we are not being asked. Which does not mean that we are not right, and that we, and now stakeholders, and we heard it at the CAG. 1 year ago, the CAG was like, why are you developing profession agnostic standards? And now the CAG says, why aren't you developing profession agnostic standards for sustainability reporting? That was a decision made on the basis months ago, and we cannot revert it now and should not. We should not revert it because there was no call from regulators, there was no clear support, there was no ask for that. So we think that before we move, we need to know more about where we want to go. Namely, we have to know who is going to be involved in the scope. Because if you start thinking, for instance, in Japan, someone was asking me, who in the company is going to be subject to those standards in case you enlarge the scope? For instance, the guy from IT who puts the information on the website. He is involved in the sustainability reporting. Is he going to be subject to these standards? So there is still a long way to go to understand exactly where we want to go and to understand exactly how our stakeholders, the environment, the ecosystem sees this possibility. Because this is not possible to happen without the support of regulators and corporate governance.
That is a point that we've made, as you know, in our public interest issues to regulators, and that we will refine and continue to make. I'm conscious of the time, so let's see if we can wrap up as soon as possible, that we can get to the other 2 points.
Okay, I'm just going to see if there is any question. Well, the last question was Begonia's question on the applicability of Part 5 and the Part 4A. Sorry?
4B.
Oh, 4B versus 5. Okay. If the provider of sustainability assurance, be it a professional accountant or non-professional accountant, is performing an engagement, a sustainability assurance engagement on information which is reported according to a general framework purpose, then it's Part 5. And then also if it's mandatory by law or if it's provided to support investors' decision making. So these are this is the scope of Part 5. If the professional accountant or non-professional accountant is providing a sustainability assurance engagement, which is, for instance, focused or on information which is voluntarily being provided voluntarily, not according to any general framework, general purpose framework, not required by law. It's just because a company decided to provide some information. Then it's part for me.
Gabriella, just on that, I think the problem is that this table of yours with its headings are exceptionally confusing and unclear as to that. And I think, you know, this little block that talks about part 5 and 4B, so how you explain it makes sense, but I don't think the message is sufficiently clear. It's again part of that bigger picture of just clarify the message. We don't disagree with the principle, but when you read this, you can easily get to the conclusion that a professional accountant must comply in a sustainability, the same engagement with both parts, and it's actually meant to be the different types of engagement.
Okay, we will.
It's a clarity issue.
Point taken, and we will clarify it as much as possible. And with this, I think that I responded to all the questions more or less, but if there is anything that I'm missing, please let me know.
No, Martin, I've gone through the list as you spoke about it, and I believe you have. It was a really useful discussion for us. Some of the things that we thought were probably, in my mind certainly, were probably not at the right level. Seems to me it's just a matter of clarity in how you describe it. It's not, the principle is definitely right, but let's just clarify that picture, you know, the one that Sandy also asked for. So thank you. I'm going to, if you're comfortable, give you feedback on the strategy and work plan. Our comments, they are not as comprehensive, so we can hopefully finish it within the next 25 minutes or so, as well as on tax planning. I'm again just going to double check if my board members want to remind me of anything that we've left out, and then back to you. And obviously also just hear from Galen. So I'll do both of them. So on strategy and work plan, I need my glasses like you do for this. On strategy and work plan, obviously we noted the good feedback and the support, and that is really important. We thought, and this is a comment you were an observer yesterday in IESB, we thought similar to the IESB, it would be really useful if you put out some communication to be transparent as to the prioritization, you know, the reasons and the thinking of the board as to why certain things are prioritized and certain things will probably only follow later. We saw your slide and agree with what you said around that, but it is just important for people out there, we believe, to understand that a little bit better. The project that you're proposing on the firm culture and governance, we believe that whole aspect of firm culture, governance, tone at the top, those are really important aspects, and it keeps on coming up in very many discussions, and even when we spoke to people from the profession yesterday, it is the emphasis on how absolutely important that is. We would suggest, though, that you're mindful that you look at things from a network perspective, because the tone at the top should flow through to the non-audit services, the advisory side. So just really a big gap if it's only when it comes to the element of audit, and really possibly look at it at a network level to capture those. And so definitely support for dealing with that. Then when it comes to the enhancing the scope of the code that you spoke about, we understand what you're saying and how those things are popping up. You know, a year ago it was unusual and unheard of that there's a plan to start setting ethics standards for others that are linked to this whole system, and I think sustainability opened the door. The sequencing and prioritization of that is just really important. I think with every decision you make to go beyond the professional accountants and the part that's regular, the people that are regulated already in terms of the code, it is really important to make sure that it is, you know, the right way, the right time, and appropriate to be dealing with that. So not a problem with the principle, but just the pointing out the importance of sequencing and prioritizing why you're doing something and what the benefits are, because there is always the risk, and you mentioned the comment earlier on, that you set ethical and other requirements for all sorts of people, but it doesn't really help if there's not a hook of some regulator holding them responsible to actually comply with that. So I think those are the comments on the strategy and work plan. I don't think anything really controversial. Then just on tax planning, and your comments were really valuable on tax planning, because sometimes it's necessary for us to also be reminded of, and we've been reminded of that in a couple of ethics IESBA projects over the past 2 or 3 years, of the level of groundbreaking work that IESBA has done in the past couple of years. There was nothing before on this. This is a first. We reminded ourselves that a lot of the scoping of this was informed by some of those international documents that were put out by the OECD, UN, etc. So I think this is a really important project. What we said to ourselves, what we want to ask you and your board, because you also made the comment that, is it going far enough? Can it go further? It can always go further. There are always lots of other things that you can potentially address and would like to address, but you also want to get to a baseline where at least it gets adopted, accepted, and implemented. We had a very similar discussion. It reminded me when you spoke about that with the PI definition, where we said, what about this, what about this, what about this? But sometimes getting that baseline out is a very significant leap forward that shouldn't be held back. So I guess in our mind, the question is just, in getting this out, you set some of you set your project objectives at the beginning of the project in your project proposal, and just for you as a board to just take one step back to say, are we achieving that project objectives? Because that clears the risk of, scope creep and wanting to add and go further, and rather getting it out at the right time. In other words, does it explain behavior, appropriate behavior when it comes to tax planning? Because you can't really judge now whether it will change behavior, but you must ask yourself, is this explaining behavior? And hopefully if people apply that and comply with these requirements, it will change behavior. So that for us is almost the measure. Now, I know you do that stand back and make sure that you actually can report back in terms of measuring yourself against your initially set targets that you try to achieve. I think the other two other comments that when it comes to that is just there's always this aspect, and in a way that's what what this project tried to achieve, is not just holding people to the minimum legal requirement, because you can operate within the realm of the law, but it's probably still not at an appropriate ethical level, or dealing with things in the applying with the that principle of substance over form. Are you just doing justice to the legal form, or are you actually doing justice to the spirit or the substance? And I know that's been an overarching comment or overarching objective, and I think that's part of that question around behavior. The only other comment, two other comments. The documentation, I know that's something that's on your radar, and it is really important to have that stand back. You referred to that stand back test. Dave, our colleague here next to me, always reminds us that if it's not documented, it's not done. So that requirement to document and make sure that you applied it, I have a very strong view on that as well. Whenever auditors and audit committee say to me, the regulator just had documentation issues, but documentation is important. Documentation is part of showing that you applied your mind. So I know it's something that's on your agenda, so just really the documentation point. And the one other point that was raised here, and apologies, it was raised under tax planning, but I actually should raise it under strategy and work plan, else I'm going to be shot down by many of my board members, is the terminology of client. That is a really difficult issue. It's the concept of the client being the word client, or the term client, is often used in the sense of it being the audited entity or the auditee, as they call it in some jurisdictions. But actually, if you read the opening line of an audit report, the client of the auditor, of the statutory order or the assurance provider, in many instances is actually the members, the shareholders of the business. So maybe just really in doing your strategy and work plan and dealing with many of those aspects and dealing with glossary of terms and all sorts of things, probably not now, but in that project, just rethink the use of the word client and whether that is not just the appropriate word, but giving the appropriate message. And I will refer that back to the project that we talked to the IESBA about, and that is when it comes to fraud and how the message has been turned around in the project, not to say what the auditor is not doing, but what the auditor should be doing. And that's not just for everybody else out there, but that's a very important message in the mindset of the person, of the auditor, to rethink who's the client and who's the audited entity, which is actually two different people potentially. So maybe just that one, linking it back to the strategy and work plan. It sort of popped up in our conversations around tax planning because that client word is used there, but it is something that you might want to not deal with now in this project, but deal with when you deal with your culture and governance project. So I'll park there, double check with my colleagues. Have I left out anything important? Comfortable? Dave?
Thank you, Linda. On the stand back provision, I just want to expand on that a little bit. And if somebody else wants to add some color, that would be great. I like the stand back provision in the tax planning, that in the course of, well, whether it's tax planning or in the course of an audit, hundreds, thousands of decisions are made within the framework of the standards and that sort of thing, but then standing back and assessing those in total to see if it still makes sense, I think is really important. Which isn't to say you wait until the end to make those decisions, but that you've made those decisions within the framework all along, and then you're looking at them, looking at the big picture. And so that was just sort of a clarification that we discussed.
Thank you very much, Linda and all. Well, again, first of all, thank you for the support expressed to the strategy and work plan in general, and in particular to the possible development of something that we don't know yet what it's going to be on firm culture and governance. It's truth. Yeah, we still have to see what this is going to be, but this is important to have the PIOB support, because this is, again, a very new area. We have to dare a little bit to step into these new areas, but again, it's a public interest issue. It's really a public interest thing and conviction that are leading us into this direction and making us move very fast as a burning platform. It's not possible to see what we see around, and the ethics board standing still and say, okay, we are going to develop some standards on this and that. So this, your support is critical, because this is going to be a very crucial area of work and very new and etc. So thank you for that. I'm happy that the PIOB seems comfortable and happy as well with that. With respect to the scope of the code, yes, that's just like I said, this is something that we will keep in our radar as a very important area of work. But we have to be careful, because, again, we have to undertake a lot of outreach, speak with the stakeholders, see how they see this possibility, because it's no use developing something that nobody is going to use or support. Again, it's not because of it's not just because the IESBA develops professional diagnostic standards or whatever, or expands the scope of the code, that the scope of the code is going to be expanded. we need the others. So it's working with the others. It's about otherness. It's about taking the stakeholders together. So it's going to take some time. But just like Linda, you were suggesting, our approach in principle, and again, this is still subject to a final discussion, but our initial perspective about this is that we should go very carefully and progressively with individual projects probably, and the first one could be the one on sustainability reporting, but and not go wild and say now the code applies to everybody and to everyone. It would be nice, the world would be better, but it's not enough. We need more. Then on tax. So I think that in terms of
in just the client terminology, and also I mean the point we just made about be transparent with how you decided on priorities.
Okay, point taken about the communication of the reasons and the grounds for priorities. I think it's very easy to do it because I mean once it's decided, because we have not taken and we will not take any decision without a very careful and rigorous assessment of the resources of the burning platforms, drivers, etc. So point taken. And on the client's definition, well, again, as you know, this is one of the possible projects, future projects in our strategy and work plan. It was there, it was suggested. It is not impossible that it is going to be one part of the culture, from culture and governance. It's identified, it's in our radar, it's, I would say, only a matter of prioritization and of urgency regarding others. It was, I think, well positioned at the start, but then with everything at the same time, I think we'll have to address that carefully, but okay, we take also note of the importance given by the PIOB to this very specific topic, which was, by the way, subject to discussions at the board in September as well. So it's nothing new for us. It's just a matter of addressing the priorities in the right way. On tax planning, yes, thank you very much also for the acknowledgement of the importance of the standard. I mean, we really think that this is important and this is groundbreaking and that this may make a difference, but again, we need more than the IESBA developing the standard. We will do all the effort to go outside and socialize and explain and do efforts for the adoption, but the role of our stakeholders, namely PIOB and others, it's going to be very important because it's, I must say, it was a lonely journey. I'm not saying a lonely journey because the stakeholders seemed somehow distant from this, apart from the not always positive reactions that we had at the start from some stakeholders, but apart from that, the fact that we managed to have more than 40 responses, I think, to the consultation was very good, but we still need our stakeholders to get together and help us advancing the project. Then on the it's a baseline that has to be acceptable and implementable, and it was always in our spirit. Again, it would be a very good academic exercise to do something more robust, more daring, bold, etc. But standards are not an end in itself. I mean, we don't work to develop standards because it's nice to develop standards. They have to have a practical impact in economies, in business, and for that they have to be accepted and implementable. So somewhere in between the ambition, the great ambition, without which we can't do anything, and the right place where we put our feet, that's what we tried to land. So to your question, does it meet the objectives? Will it change and drive appropriate behaviors? You will not be surprised if my response is, it is my conviction that it will change behaviors, or it will at least provide a very strong baseline for professional accountants to adopt the right behaviors, appropriate behaviors. Now, will it prevent wrongdoing? Will it prevent professional accountants or providers of tax planning from doing what they should not do? No, but this is the same thing with every standards, with every rules. if someone wants to break the rule or the standard, they will do it. This is not about it. What we are trying to do here is, I think, provide something that tells professional accountants involved in tax planning, telling them that this is not a wild space. This is not a wild space where each one can do what they want, and provide them with the robust support to solve ethical dilemmas and ethical questions when they are called to decide if they are going to provide the service, how they are going to provide the service, etc. So more than avoiding wrongdoing, which is not possible, this is more, it's not guidance, it's standards, but it's helping driving the right behaviors. Now, there was a question about legal and ethical, ethics beyond legality and these kind of things. Let's be clear, this is not about compliance. I mean, what is clearly legal, it's legal. So we don't have a problem with that. What is clearly illegal, it's clearly illegal. But you're right when you say, well, not everything that is legal is ethical. So there are some considerations in that respect. And that drives us into the gray zone, which is, okay, it could be legal, but there are some ethical implications that have to be addressed. Yeah, we are not completely bound by what is legal, and that's why the standards look as they look, but mainly driven by the need to take into consideration ethical values or principles when performing the service. On documentation, and I think and stand back test documentation. This is a never-ending discussion because, and it's not only on tax planning. Documentation recurrently comes as a question: should we, shouldn't we require? It was the same discussion on technology, as far as I can remember. I was already at the board. So this is a topic that one of these days, and it's in our list of possible potential work streams for the next strategic cycle, documentation is something that we'll have to address one day holistically and not for technology of tax planning. This said, it is my conviction, agreeing that, as you say, Linda, that the documentation is important to facilitate the evidence and to that things have been complied, etc. It has a dark side. It has really a dark side, which is, on the one hand, for the provider of the service, just limiting, saying, okay, here's the documentation, I complied with everything that I had to comply, and leaving out something that was not, for which it was not required or so. And it has a dark side for the regulators and supervisors as well, because they tend to focus only on what's on the documents and leaving outside a lot of things. I was a regulator, and I know. And sometimes people just sit on the documents and they don't make the best out of it. So I'm not saying that documentation is not important, on the contrary, but I think that we should also see it from the many perspectives and not take it as granted that it would be immediately a necessarily great improvement of the quality of the service. And finally, on the stand-back tests, there were many discussions around this. These stand-back tests, just to, well, it's nothing new in the IESBA code. The conceptual framework itself requires some stand-back tests and standing back and looking holistically to the decisions and the approach of the professional accountant to the many issues. So it's really part of the code. What in this case was decided was to make it more specific, just like it happened with no-CLAR, for instance, where the stand-back test is there as well, as a complement to something which is to establish the credible basis. And in response to you, Dave, it is clear, and I think we made, or at least we are going to make it clear, that it's not something that the professional accountant will do necessarily after establishing the credible basis and going through all the paths and the steps, it's something that he or she can and should probably do at the same time, simultaneously. So we understand that this can cause some doubts, but it's the way of it's complementary to something and not per se a decision criteria for the professional accountant. Yeah, James.
I know you're finished, and I think maybe just, and that's been a very comprehensive, almost every item, just the point that Linda's raised, and it's good advice, and Ken's on the line, but bringing the board back in December as they're approving a tax, again, looking at the objectives that they set out and how the final product matches against their expectations and the ambition. It's good practice for the board in concluding, and so I see no problem in doing that. We normally do, so we can round off after 2.5 years, where did we land? And that's your question. And then we can also, of course, communicate that to the PIOB and to our stakeholders in conclusion. Thank you.
Okay, wow, that was, we managed to cover really important projects that are all going to feature for approval at your board agenda in December. I guess, Gabriella, all that we can do is to wish you well for the December meeting, wish you good luck. All of these things are really important to us, and we watch with bated breath and with our fingers crossed that everything runs smoothly and that you end in the right place. Thank you very much for your time that you spend here. Thank you for your input, and thank you for really good papers. The last thing that I would like to also just say, and I actually forgot about that yesterday, I remember now with the IESBA, is Galen, this will be the last time that we see you face to face. We of course have a December online meeting, but face to face at one of our PIOB meetings in your capacity as CAG chair. Thank you very much, Galen. You've always been really honest, robust, and transparent in our sessions with us, in the meeting, in our private sessions. We really, really appreciate the huge contribution that you've made to the work of IESBA and to the work of the PIOB. So we wish you well. We are sure we'll see you in another shape or form in this bigger ecosystem of ours in due course. So thank you very much for that as well. I'm going to ask my board members that we take a short, I know we're not supposed to have a break now because the public session must continue with the approvals, but I think we do need to take a short 5-minute comfort break, and then we'll be reconvene at 20 past. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all of you, Linda and board. It was a pleasure and very useful for us. Let me just add that for December, I take the good wishes for December board meeting, but I'm in good company because the board is wonderful, the staff as well. So it's not my performance.
And we're sending our observer with extra energy bars to make sure that they can see it through. Thank you.